call this hearing back to order, please. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Yvette Clark, for her questions. Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Fortenberry, for holding this very important hearing. Let me just start by stating that it's evident that there is a direct relationship between the technical assistance and positive success rate for small businesses. In fact, there's evidence that firms that receive technical assistance double their chances to succeed. Small businesses in many inner city communities, including my district, benefit from accessible, affordable technical assistance. And as more socially, economically disadvantaged and women-owned businesses continue to grow rapidly, we must continue to find ways to provide resources they need to succeed, since these businesses have historically faced so many obstacles in order to start and to improve their companies. I'd like to start my questioning to Mr. Prakash. As you know, my colleague, Chairman Schuler, introduced H.R. 2389, which is the Small Energy Efficient Business Act, which was later incorporated into the House Energy Bill that passed last August. These provisions required the SBA to develop an Energy Star program for small businesses and to provide grants through SBDCs to help small businesses become energy efficient. My question is to you is that, has your agency started developing the Energy Star program, and do you intend to ensure that small businesses who need financial assistance the most to become energy efficient will be able to get that funding?
Thank you for the question. We have indeed. We obviously we're in receipt of the passing of the Energy Efficiency Act. We are looking forward to implementing the bill. Part of the delay, frankly, for us was making sure we understood what the funding was going to be in 2008 for the agency. And at this point, now that that is clear and we know what we're going to be providing to the SBDCs, we are looking forward to implementing a pilot set of grants for the energy efficiency audits that were required by the law with the SBDCs.
Can you give us a sense of how the Energy Star program will work for small businesses? What structure or infrastructure has been put in place to facilitate that?
I think I may be confused around the Energy Star program. I think I'm speaking to the Energy Efficiency Grant Program to the SBDCs. I'm less familiar with the Energy Star requirement, but I guess I'm assuming you're speaking of the same thing.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, yeah. Now, I mean, what we're planning to do is, as per the legislation spoke to grant amounts between $100,000 and $300,000 to get started. I think from our point of view, there's certainly a couple of SBDCs that have already demonstrated some best practices in the energy audit area. We'd like to take those best practices, learn what they have done that has been so successful, put those into our program announcement for the pilot program, and try to seed 5 pilots within this fiscal year, which obviously we know time is running short. We want to get those 5 pilots up and running, get some metrics, get some response back, and then hopefully, depending on the funding levels next year, work on a much broader program.
So the program hasn't yet to be implemented. Have you targeted specific regions to run these pilots in?
We haven't targeted any regions. We're still working on collecting all the pieces for the program announcement. I don't expect personally that we would move to a region by region requirement. Part of doing a competitive grant program is to allow it to be open for any SBDC to pursue it.
So you're going to do sort of an RFP for
That's right. It'll take
bidding?
the same grant RFP format as our Women's Business Center program, which is also a competitive program.
Well, the gentlelady.
Certainly, Madam Chair.
Sir, can you explain to us where are you getting the money for the program? For
Absolutely.
The energy?
Yes, we are, for both the energy and the veterans program, we'll be pulling that from the $97,120,000 that were provided in the appropriations language for grant programs.
I will come back to you when I am recognized. I yield back.
Mr. Prakash, the full committee recently sent a letter to the Budget Committee recommending that new funding new funding initiatives, but expects the core SBDC program to be fully funded before resources are directed to new services. Do you intend to not divert funds from the core SBDC program? And if so, then how do you plan to fund other initiatives?
Are you speaking to the veterans and energy specifically?
Yes, specifically.
Well, our plan today is to pull about $1 million, exactly $1 million from the $97,120,000 that was provided in the appropriations language for grants. It was a general grants line, and given that this was law and we intend to implement that law and look forward to implementing those laws, that was basically the only pool that was appropriated for those programs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I would like to recognize again the ranking member, Mr. Fortenberry, for his follow-up questions.
Ms. Sanderson, I'd like to continue with you as well. In your experience, what are you seeing as emerging trends among women entrepreneurs in a certain, similar to the question I asked previously, where do you see certain types, the trajectory of certain types of opportunities and success stories emerging? Can they be quantified to a particular set of opportunities? Is it a continuum of things? And what are the barriers in terms of, what are the resources that are giving rise to certain sets of entrepreneurial opportunities for women that you work with? What other barriers are out there that are prohibiting or limiting entrepreneurial opportunities for the sector in which you work with? In other words, what are your success stories, if there's a general pattern of them, and do you see those being duplicated and continuing to grow versus other opportunities that might be on the continuum of things that are available?
You know, the program is set up as a center. We're a center. So, you know, we're kind of like the switchboard operator where we can really direct people to other resources that might suit their needs better, like the veterans program. We have a veterans representative, a permanent position on our board of directors, specifically for the purpose of being that switchboard operator to direct them to the other resource partners that might better serve their needs. So that's an important distinction, I believe, of the program, that we are a center and a resource for all women. I do think that women have some very specific and unique characteristics. They are risk adverse. So they are afraid to get a loan and afraid to sign the collateral, because they know that they'd have to sign their collateral for their house, and that's very scary for women. So that's a unique feature for women business owners. Also, the issue of isolation. Many women start home-based businesses, and that's unique to women. And also support, the support piece. Our program focuses on critical skills, knowledge, tools, and support. And what I find is for the women that support element to our program is really what they need. Is they need ongoing, continual help in kind of a continuum of care. So wherever they come to us, whether it's early stage entrepreneur or middle stage, or really looking, to sustain and grow and get another loan and expand and take advantage of some of the capital 504 programs, it's really that continuum of ongoing care, step by step, that is really important to them.
It's interesting that you mentioned home-based businesses, and I just want to bring this up in a larger context, because the last hearing we held, if I recall correctly, what we were trying to do is identify clear burdens or barriers to entry for entrepreneurs, and there are many of those outside the traditional bounds of what we think of. We tend to quantify them as capital. Mr. Carroll, you do a real good job of identifying the four key ones. I think it's capital, technology, regulatory, and education, if I recall correctly. But there are other issues out there that could smooth the pathway. And let's just pick up with home-based businesses, for instance. Are there tax code changes that could be made to allow this to be a little bit easier for people to take advantage of the potential tax deductions that are available? That's one. Do we encourage, are we encouraging, or are our real estate laws such, our deductibility on real estate laws such that we give a disincentive in a certain sense to wiring through technology so that we can have extended workplace, either hours or distant locations of work? I think these are the types of questions that we need to look at as drivers underneath or impediments underneath what could be much more flourishing opportunities in entrepreneurship, given the constraints that exist in certain communities. We talked about disabled veterans. There might be certain constraints for women entrepreneurs, and you've identified some of them that other initiatives might help take care of. So I was trying to get at that point as well earlier, and that's why I wanted you to expand upon, do you see a certain trajectory of opportunity that is fitting the niche that you're working with?
I do, and for us, and having been a woman business owner, we start with the business plan. Having been in business for 10 years myself without a business plan, I think the fallacy of the plan is you only write it to get money. But the reality is I may still be in business had I had a plan with accurate financial projections. So, we work real hard on trying to set a distinction between a hobby and a business. And we serve a lot of hobbies. Dolly's Donuts out of her kitchen is very different than someone who has capital and is renting space and has employees and is really trying to pay back their loan and trying to grow and get the core business skills necessary. And our program focuses on core business skills and what's really necessary. And then we focus on their area of deficiency. If they're weak in marketing, we get them marketing help, and if they're weak on finance, we match them up in a one-on-one program, a coaching program we have with experts that focus on that deficiency. And to get them the knowledge that they need for tax purposes, we partner with our state and our local experts in that to bring that kind of educational entrepreneurial training to them.
Thank you. One other impediment that we haven't discussed on that's probably worthy of a hearing in of itself is the issue, and we've had them in the larger committee, but the issue of how the health insurance lack of availability or portability impedes entrepreneurial opportunity, is a real productive drain in society, because it basically chains a person to whatever institution they may be with that is providing them health insurance and does not allow a shift into what they would desire, what they would socially prefer in terms of risk-taking, and that's a topic for another day. But Mr. Yancey, I want to say thank you for your work with SCORE. I think it's probably our nation's oldest effort in this regard, and well-established. It was in Norfolk, Nebraska recently to celebrate 3 entrepreneurs. One was a new barbecue business. One was a person who was doing marketing through her home on the internet, and there was another business, but it was a celebration of the SCORE chapter's work in one of my primary rural communities. In that regard, I think it's important also to point out that sometimes the answer is no, and this is very important as well, to properly allocate scarce resources in a society, whether or not the capital is not adequately there, whether or not the technological barriers have been overcome, whether or not there's sufficient understanding of how to market or account or lay out a business plan, leads sometimes to the answer being no, this is not a good fit for you. Because being in business, particularly an entrepreneurial business, is risky. It is a heavy lift. It takes not only a deep passion and a long view, but a lot of things to line up accordingly. In that regard, Mr. Yancey, I want to go back to that same question. What do you see evolving as new trends for entrepreneurs that mitigate those risk elements, that increase the probability of success, and again can provide a broader template as we're discussing this for SCORE to work with, so that we could precisely identify real opportunities that are emerging that have strong probability of success?
As we address the needs of our clients that come in, you're right. The need to say no is something that we do often, and try to do that without in any way damaging anybody's dreams or making them feel like they're not don't have the possibility of being successful at a point in time. We do see opportunities, franchise type opportunities, where there is a model and there are systems and processes in place that can be replicated successfully. We talk more about the franchise opportunity these days than we have in the past. Mm-hmm. We also find that clients that come to us today are better prepared than they have been in the past, and I think the reason for that is the proliferation of information on the internet. and one's ability to go and search small business start and see 39 million different opportunities to get information. That's certainly valuable, but information only goes so far, and we believe that what we provide is an opportunity for a small business owner to take that information, bring it into one of our counselors, and allow us to help them understand how that or if that applies in their particular business environment. I think, again, the franchise opportunity seems to be one that we see more, and certainly that we recommend when someone does not have really strong business background.
Well, again, let me leave you with a parting challenge to say that we're here to help creatively think through new policy opportunities that will strengthen America's entrepreneurial vision. This is a great growing trend, particularly among younger workers who don't project and see themselves out as being with someone for 30 years in retirement and all those other niceties in which we used to structure our labor force. I think it's a great trend. It is very meaningful to people to be able to take the gift of their own two hands and their intellect and create a product and take full responsibility for that, and in turn create a product that's good for society and have the fullness of returns to them, and in the process maybe help some other families along the way with employment opportunities. So even though I think the Small Business Committee and the small business policies, the SBA and U.S. affiliated organizations really should be deeply gratified by the opportunity you've been given to help people at the most fundamental level to provide well for themselves in an area that's deeply gratifying. To that end, though, what I like to avoid is a conversation about, hey, here's the pie, we need a bigger slice, we need a bigger slice. Let's expand the pie, the size of the pie, things that are not working, that are dated, that are from a previous era, let's let go of, things that need to be modernized, expanded because they have real benefit to cost ratios and high levels of return is what I want to hear about, and I think the chairman and I are greatly disposed toward being open to receiving that type of input from you also. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with a couple of my questions that I had from earlier. Mr. Carroll, obviously you've been an outstanding champion in our community, and I kind of like to brag on what AdvantageWest has done in our communities, and so I'd like you to share some of the ideas that you've had in form of a question, but tell us more specifically how you've been able to organize a community. Your organization has helped implement economic growth strategies for the rural areas. The western part of North Carolina is a very rural area. We have 3 counties that have less than 10,000 people in population. It seems that one of the principles for AdvantageWest is using resources or partnerships at its greatest extent possible. Can you outline to the committee why it's particularly important in rural areas to have these outlining groups to come in to help you and organize and to promote entrepreneurship throughout the region?
Thank you. I'll briefly summarize what I mentioned earlier. In a 23-county area like the AdvantageWest region, it's roughly the size of the state of Maryland. But due to the presence of, thankfully, of both national and state parks in that landscape, our geography is a beautiful geography, but our population is just not that dense. We very much, when you get outside of Asheville and Hendersonville, we reflect a landscape that would be representative of rural America. And so the leadership teams that are required to go through prerequisite training through the Center for Rural Entrepreneurship, RUPRI as it's called, are crucial to these very rural and small communities as you described, Chairman Schuler. And we're excited about the momentum of the program. The 14 leadership teams include 12 countywide programs. The Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indian has developed a leadership team, and the most recent team to complete training was the town of Black Mountain, a very small, quaint little municipality. Each of these leadership teams have in common that they represent a cross-section of people in their given community. There are elected officials, There are people from the financial community, local business owners. We've made it a requirement that entrepreneurs be seated as members of each leadership team as they go through the Certified Entrepreneurial Community checklist and meet all of their requirements. And I tend to believe that when you make progress, whether it's rural or urban America, generally people follow leadership and they follow a sound plan and strategy. And I know that sounds like I'm oversimplifying something that can be very challenging, but in essence, that's what this Certified Entrepreneurial Community Program is all about. It's putting some structure in place at the grassroots level. It's getting the right leaders in behind that structure, and then requesting that resources like the group that I'm here with on the panel today be a part of that Certified Entrepreneurial Community effort so that we can deliver those programs and services more efficiently in, again, very rural communities.
How has the program worked with working with our panel here today? I mean, describe some of the relationships and how it's worked and some of the benefits that the entrepreneurs receive from that.
Well, we're off to a very good start in that our 23-county area, we have a regional presence of SBA in Asheville, our urban center. And then for the rest of the region, again, that is so rural, we have SBTDC offices, one based at West Carolina University, the Western Carolina University campus in southwestern North Carolina. We have an office of SBTDC at Appalachian State University in Boone. All that football publicity, people know where Boone is now, Appalachian State University. That's right. You're right, Congressman Fortenberry. I believe they do. And in Asheville, a relationship with one of our financial institutions, Bank of America, has provided some of their space for an SBTDC office in Asheville. And then in the Hickory MSA, between Asheville and Charlotte, that part of the foothill counties, we have the 4th SBTDC office in the region. Those SBTDC offices are beginning to work with us. You have to keep in mind that the Certified Entrepreneurial Community Program was just designed and launched in 2007. And as the communities begin to go through the checklist, the SBTDC field personnel are working with those local leadership teams, again, because there's a requirement that the leadership teams reach out to them. We think that over time we'll pick up some economies of scale this way, and it will get that technical assistance and access to capital to entrepreneurs, not to say that they could not have gotten it otherwise. I believe in many cases they could. This will be a more structured and a more efficient way to deliver it through the 14 different communities that are participating.
Thank you. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our chair of the Small Business Committee, the chairwoman of Small Business, Mrs. Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this very important hearing, and Ranking Member Fortenberry. Mr. Prakash, I would like to address my first question to you, and that is regarding your Emerging Cities proposal that will draw resources from the agency's already strapped budget for very limited results, helping 200 inner city businesses. This is in comparison to a program like the Women's Business Center, where, for example, the Canisius College Women's Business Center in Buffalo, New York, whose director is testifying here today, assists on average 2,000 women per year, including many inner city women. Yet, as you know, this is with a grant that is approximately half of what you are spending on your entire new initiative. Given the cost of this new program and the limited deliverables, how can this be a good use of this agency's funds?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chairwoman. The Emerging 200 program is sufficiently focused on an area of coverage that we currently just do not have coverage in. Currently, our best estimate is about less than 10% of any of our resource partner
I'm sorry, what you just said, that they don't have coverage? The what?
I'm saying that less than 10% of our nationwide coverage with our resource partners is in the inner cities in the United States.
I would like for Mr. Wilson and Ms. Sanderson to comment on that.
Sure.
Madam Chair, I don't have a breakdown, but I will try to get that for you. Obviously, whether it's St. Louis or Philadelphia or New York or Atlanta or wherever, we have SBDCs right downtown, and they're serving the inner city community. Obviously, as you know, with 25 million small business people across the country, if you took all of these, we're only reaching a part of them.
But does that 10% sounds right to you?
10% might very well be a reasonable number. I'm thinking of places like Georgia and Pennsylvania and New York. I would think in New York, probably we're better than that.
Mr. Prakash, let me go to, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson, I'm sorry.
Thank you for the question. The program has, the Women's Business Center program specifically has about 100 federally funded programs right now in the whole country. So, there are limited, ways that we can focus specifically on inner cities. We had a conversation at the break that that many of these areas that are being targeted are urban that don't have a focus or don't even have a focus of Women's Business Center or maybe an SBDC program.
But do you really think that only 10% of your centers are serving 10% of women in urban areas?
Our numbers aren't tracked that way. The way we track it is socioeconomically disadvantaged. That's how we're required to track it.
Okay.
And the Women's Business Centers see between 46 and 52% on an annual basis. So, whether those women come from the inner city or not is not a focus. It's tracked a different way. So I can't answer the question.
When we look at our minority numbers of over 30%, Madam Chair, I would correct myself. Probably.
I'm sorry?
When we look at SBDC overall counseling clients and training
Yes.
counts, which are over 30% minority, I would probably raise my estimate of coverage.
At a time when the budget is being cut, and at a time when the entire budget for SBA has been cut, and the money for Women Business Center and Small Business Development Centers, you have to ask yourself if the type of money that you're taking from this program is worth taken to finance 200 businesses. The return that you're going to get compared to the work and the goals that are achieved through the network of small business development centers across the nation and women business centers.
May I comment?
I know the answer, but I want to tell you that $250,000 out of the money of the Corp to fund.
That money's not coming from the core, Madam Chairwoman.
It's coming from the agency's budget.
It's a request.
It's coming from the cuts that have been from the agency whose budget has been cut for almost 50% in the last 6 years. So when you talk about consolidating programs, when you talk about making government smaller, here you come and take money and create a new program. Let's talk about the language on the energy bill that you made reference to, and the language on the HR 4253 for the VETS program. I'm going to read the language to you. Subject to amounts approved in advance in Appropriations Acts. That's the language for HR 4253. On the energy bill, the language reads specifically in advance, and the energy bill goes further and says it takes the extraordinary step to include separate. So my question to you today is, what does advance mean?
Madam Chairwoman, the authorizing bill may very well say advance. It's the appropriations language that has said the $97,120,000 for grants. It did not specify Section 21A grants. And we are being told also by your colleague, Ms. Clark, we want to implement this bill. We want to support energy and support veterans, which is core to our mission. And we intend to do it. And we've reached a very nice accommodation to be able to support that as a pilot. And none of the money is going away from the SBDC program. It's simply supporting energy and veterans within the SBDC program.
My question is, why don't you then use the $250,000 to do that?
This is a fiscal year 08 implementation. We don't have those $250,000 to do that.
My question is, the statute reads, subject to amounts approved in advance in Appropriations Act.
Where does the appropriations bill say there's money for veterans?
Are you going to request appropriation separate for the vets program?
We're going to be using $1 million from the $97 million that was appropriated for grants.
Why are you doing that? That is
our only grant pool that's been
But the statute
appropriated.
says separate. It doesn't say that you are going to take money from that. It says separate from that amount of money, from that program.
There is no other grant pool to take from.
Yeah, but we here passed the law, and you implement it. So it doesn't say that you are going to fund the vet grant program through the corp money.
I think I'm confused. We're here to implement laws. We look forward to implementing these laws. We support them.
Well, I'm telling
But I'm
you
not sure
today
how you expect us to fund them if
that
we don't
you
fund
have
them
to
from a
use-
grant pool.
Well, the statute is very clear. It says it's separate. It says in Advance in Appropriations Act. And what I'm saying to you today is that you have to use a separate appropriation and don't come to us with something different, because then we're going to hold a hearing and I'm going to bring the administrator to explain to us why you're doing what you're not supposed to do. That is not what the statute said. Mr. Wilson, you testified that the SBA is defying congressional intent in its interpretation of how the grant programs are to be funded. So, based on the fact that the statute is clear, what do you intend to do? Are you going to file a lawsuit because they are in violation of the statute?
Madam Chair, the association probably does not have standing to file that suit. You know, and when you're trying to work with a partner, litigation is not an avenue that you would readily jump into. We've talked with a number of people, as you know. Michael and Tim and others have been so helpful to us, and Mr. Serrano's staff and Chairman Carey's staff and others. We are not experts in writing appropriation statutes or authorizing statutes. We had thought it was clear, working with your staff and Senator Carey's staff and Ms. Snow's staff, we had thought it was clear, but we've had others, some of Senator Durbin's staff and legal counsel at SBA.
But the parliamentarian of the House made it clear to us that the language that was submitted was in violation of House rule. If it's in violation of House rule, we cannot include such a language.
Right. And so we had hoped, I think as you did, as your staff and everyone on the committee, that language was clear enough. Apparently SBA legal counsel views it differently, and I do not know that we're in a position to address that through litigation. I would hope if there are disagreements among the agency lawyers and congressional staff and the authorizers and appropriators, that perhaps language can be found that everyone can agree on its meaning. But we had, like you, we had thought that what you had done was adequate.
What the administration needs to do is to read the statute, and I'm going to read it again to you subject to amounts approved in advance in Appropriations Act. The administration may make grants or enter, and it continues. So it's quite clear. But you know what? We created the Women's Procurement Program. We signed it into law. The administration refused to implement it. And the Women's Chamber of Commerce, of course, they want to work with the administration, but when they are in violation of the law, you have a remedy, and that is to bring a lawsuit. And they did. And the court ruled in their favor. So it seems like women in this country, when they feel violated and that the rights are being violated, they will use the legal recourse that they have in front of them. Mr. Blackwell. You claim that the process for awarding grants to outreach centers was altered to increase the program's competitiveness. Yet some of this year's grant recipients have no history of serving veterans. At the same time, you terminated funding for outreach centers like the Boston one that focuses only on training veterans. This center has served over 4,000 clients over the past 4 years. Given the Veterans Corporation's limited budget, why would you fund organizations without experience over those who have demonstrated success assisting veterans?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The board faced a very difficult decision 2 years ago in that funds are limited, and in order to maintain the national mandate of 106-50, serving nationwide programs, we decided to follow the lead of women business centers in competitive grants. Those competitive grants would be based on opportunities that exist. For example, in 1999, when 106-50 was passed, there were very few, quote, veteran assistance centers around the country. Today, there are literally hundreds, and those hundreds have demonstrated the ability.
But can you explain to me why you don't fund the Boston Center while you fund the Technological and Research Development Authority and the Jewish Vocational Service in Boston, the Seattle Business Assistance Center? They have no experience, none. In their mission statement, if you go to, and they have no experience.
I understand,
They provide no services. So why are you going to terminate centers that have the experience, the capability, and the history of providing services to veterans, and instead give to these who have no experience?
I go back to the fact that the board decided on a competitive grant system in FY06, and that competitive grant system, again modeled after the Women in Business Centers, gave 3 centers that we funded in FY07, Boston, St. Louis, and Flint, Michigan, the opportunity for a non-competitive grant program for that entire year. At that time, they were told that they would be part of a competitive grant system for FY08. That FY08 system had over 32 grants from 22 states compete for those grants.
So what is the success of the 3 centers that has been operating?
Those charts are in my written performance, and we evaluate those every quarter. Their success rates are good. The
So
organizations
why are you not providing the money for them?
It's
if
very
they're
simple.
Good?
We could only fund the top 8 according to our grants committee review. There are 32 other grants that are there.
You're telling me that those who have no experience, no track record, no history, no capability, that they score better than those who have been on the ground providing the service?
No, I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you that these centers
Let's
are
go to the
qualified
next
through the
statement.
grants.
Question. Mr. Blackwell, the act creating the Veterans Corporation required that your organization develop and coordinate relationships with a number of federal agencies, such as DOL, DOD, and the Department of Commerce. Additionally, you were to work with SCORE and SBDCs. It seems that over the past 2 years, or few years, the corporation has ignored this mandate. In the last 12 months, what has been your interaction or partnership with any of these agencies or resource partners?
I'd happy to answer that. In December of '07, we co-sponsored the Department of Defense's Doing Business with DoD's show.
But previous to that, since you've been operating, so talk to me about all the coordination that you have been doing.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
In accordance to the mandate.
We work with almost every agency except agriculture, and they just haven't had an opportunity to do that. Ken Yancey at SCORE and I have been working together for my entire 3-year tenure. We send through our portal at TVC's site 300 to 500 people a day to Ken's Counseling Center. Mr. Wilson and I have a memorandum of understanding since my tenure 3 years ago, and we work literally last Friday. Mr. Wilson's organization and mine did a ribbon cutting in Scranton, Pennsylvania for a young vet who's started his own mining company.
That was last Friday.
That was
Previous
literally
to
last
that,
Friday.
besides doing workshop in December.
We've been I speak at Mr. Wilson's conferences. We work on programs together. We have an active memorandum of understanding. In terms of DOE, we work very closely with the Department of Energy.
Okay, a specific initiative with the Department of Energy.
We co-sponsor their annual event. We co-sponsored the 8th annual event for Small Business Conference in June of last year.
You sponsor their annual event. Is that solely for veterans? It's
No,
not.
it's veterans comprise a
Mr.
large number
Blackwell,
of those things.
TVC was basically chartered with 3 missions. To establish a professional certification advisory committee, to engage the major federal agencies and partner with them to assist vets, and finally, to establish and maintain a network of information and assistance centers. Given that the first 2 mandates have not been met, it seems the corporation will have more resources to ensure a solid framework of centers to assist veterans. However, we understand that the 3 centers that TVC was responsible for funding are all about to close. What efforts have the organization pursued to ensure that the 3 centers in Boston, Missouri, and Michigan will not close?
Well, we're very concerned about their fate as well as we are our own.
What are you going to do so that they don't close?
We're very actively involved in trying to find private funding. A lot of my time is being put on finding that outside private sector funding.
Okay, let me make this clear to you. Then Chairman Talent and I worked very hard to create this legislation, to pass this legislation. And we spent a lot of time in putting this together. And I promise you that I intend to spend a lot of time to make sure that the Vets Corps gets back on track. And so you and I, we're going to be seeing each other a lot.
Well, we'll welcome those
And we
opportunities.
will intend to hold oversight hearings to make sure that the Vets Corps accomplish what it sets out to do. And that is not to close centers and open 3 million centers and dilute the resources that you don't have. So let's make sure that the mission of this corporation is achieved, and we're going to be seeing each other quite a bit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Guess I forgot to mention to fasten your seatbelts. I'd like to follow up questions for Mrs. Clark has a couple more questions. So Ms. Clark from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up to Mr. Blackwell, I have a concern that I'd like you to address on the record here today, and that's recently reading in the New York Times on March 5th that the Senate Small Business Committee launched an investigation into a shortfall at the National Veterans Business Development Corporation. Can you please tell us why your organization is being investigated? 1. 2, why did your organization receive only $1.5 million in funding last year? And 3, how do you expect to run your program efficiently and effectively on only $1.5 million?
Well, let me start with the latter. The simple facts are there are 4.2 million veteran companies in the United States. I can't even send them a stamped envelope, let alone provide a service if I were to just be chartered to support them. Secondarily, we're very concerned, obviously, because $1.5 million does not go very far when you start talking about serving a nation. To your first question, the real issue is we're not terribly sure why they're doing that. We've provided and been in compliance with Senator Kerry and Senator Snowe and given them information on our 2007 activities in the annual report, our audit, and all the other materials they've asked for, including our strategic plan from 2008 to 2012. We are more than happy to work with them and to resolve this issue because our staff of 3, which is literally 50% of where we were 6 months ago, has a very deep commitment along with our board to supplying veteran services across the country. It's very, very, very difficult to do that when you're talking about over 600,000 young men and women who have served our country nobly, who have come back recently from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Just as a follow-up, so why did your organization receive only $1.5 million in funding last year?
Well, the Public Law 106-50 is out of authorization in 2004, and thanks to Congress, we've been able to apply for and receive appropriations in 05, 06, 07, and in 08. And those numbers decrease. We're very grateful for Congress to keeping our veteran entrepreneurship hopes alive through this organization. We had approved in the House $2.5 million, as you may know. It went to the Senate, and out of conference, it came back at 1.41. So we were very disappointed. To the chairwoman's comment, we would have been able to give a lot more grants this year had we been given the 2.5 out of the Senate. So it's very disconcerting to the board and to the professional leadership that dollars are decreasing at a time when demand is increasing.
My final question is to Ms. Sanderson. Ms. Sanderson, women's business centers have faced reductions across the board due to inadequate budget resources. Can you tell this committee in detail how this has impacted your center? And, you know, this is a major concern. I think the fastest growth in small business is taking place in women-owned businesses across the board. And the type of supports that we believe is required has not been stated explicitly here today. We also want to acknowledge the overlap that is taking place. In other words, women veterans. You know, what type of attention are they being given in the entrepreneurial sphere as well? So if you could just address that for us.
Yes, thank you for the question. Specifically regarding women's veterans, we had a focus group with all of our local veteran leaders. We've got a leader on our board of directors who's currently employed with the county in Western New York. And so we do a lot of really strategic thinking about how we reach out to these special groups. And last year, the Women's Business Center received more funding than it had in the past. We were up to 13 from 12.8. And for my particular program and the program that I run, we have a sustainability plan and a strategic plan that really forces us to look strategically at our resources and to creatively come up with diversified streams of revenue. It's the only way that we're going to sustain the organization. And I think that that's really important for women's business centers. I think it should be part of the RFP that in year 3 of their 5-year grant, they should put a sustainability plan together, because that's what we did. And it actually preceded our strategic plan, which called for us partnering with corporations and foundations and individuals, as well as defining the needs and designing programs that met the needs, did not duplicate, but collaborated with other resource partners, and charged a fair price for the products and services that we're delivering. And specifically for the socioeconomically disadvantaged and the inner city clients that we serve, we scholarship them into our programs because we believe that is core to our mission and is one of our core values. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I noticed Mr. Prakash taking some notes there. I think that is an important component, the sustainability of these technical assistance and development centers within our communities. Because, the economic times change, and certainly, I think, Mr. Blackwell, you may be seeing some of that in terms of your expectations. It is really important that we, think outside the box and look at how we can leverage what we're receiving. We expect that the dollars that we are able to appropriate to you, that they're maximized on and they're not diluted, which is one of the issues and concerns that our chairwoman has. At the same time, we got to think smart, and we got to be able to leverage this for the future of our economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Again, I'd like to recognize the Chairwoman, Ms. Velasquez.
I just got a copy of a letter that I sent to Administrator Preston that Mr. Edward Rowe answered on his behalf to me. And I'm going to read what he sent, what I asked him for him to respond, and what was his response to the subject that I raised in my letter. Administrator Preston asked me to respond to your letter of May 16th, 2007, regarding the Small Business Development Center program. You inquired as to whether proposed legislative language will provide guidance that SBDC baseline program funding is separate from the funding of other proposed SBDC-related grant initiatives. The language in question reads, and this is right after Mr. Schuler's energy bill passed, subject to amounts approved in advance in appropriations acts and separate from amounts approved to carry out Section 21, and it goes on and on. This is his response. SBA assumes its placement will be in a separate paragraph of the Small Business Act and the absence of any other overriding conflicting statutory provisions in the authorizing or appropriation statute. This proposed language maintains the main SBDC program baseline funding separate from that of any other enacted SBDC-related grant initiative programs. So, sir, why is it that administrator officials tell me and this committee something, and you come here and tell me something else?
Well, Madam Chairwoman, there was a key sentence in there, and that was in absence of any conflicting, authorizing, and appropriating language. And what we have heard, and I'm not the general counsel, this is my general counsel advising me, and I think it's correct, is that the authorizing language and the appropriations language was conflicting. The appropriations language overrides that language,
Sir,
and it was not referred to as 21A funding.
Counsel, you made reference to your legal counsel. Can you tell me right here, right now, when did your legal counsel approach the committee staff regarding this language so that they concluded what they concluded?
There have been many conversations with committee staff, both with counsel, with our legislative affairs group, both on the Senate and the House side.
None.
I'd be happy to provide that in writing when those meetings took place. I know there were several visits, and I'm not sure who attended, but there were several conversations.
Pass its overriding, and this was the last thing passed.
I will maintain my previous statement, and that is you will request funding that is separate from the SBDC for the grant program. And if not, we'll hold a hearing, and the administrator will come and will answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their testimony today. I look forward to working with my colleagues and some of the issues that were raised today to address those. This hearing is adjourned.
Yeah, take it out, please. Put it behind the TV.